Good afternoon and welcome to this formal meeting of the Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authorities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Andy Quarmby and I am the independent chairman of this committee. I'd like to begin with the health and safety announcement. There are no planned fire alarms. In the event of the fire alarm going off, we will vacate the chamber by the doors marked by the fire exits and leave the building through the exits by the reception and meet up in the car park. The meeting is being streamed live and all your comments will remain accessible online after the meeting and can be reported to the media. With this in mind, I would like to welcome no members of the public, no members of the press, such a riveting meeting that we have. Can I remind everybody to ensure that their mobiles, laptops, tablets are on silent for the duration of the meeting. The hearing loop is now activated. If you wish to speak, could I ask you to raise your hands? We will make a note and get back to you in order. Time now to move on to the formal agenda. Rachel, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. We have a number of apologies and replacement councillors. We have apologies from Councillor Philip Roberts from Lincolnshire County Council, and he is replaced by Councillor Brenda Collier. We have apologies from Councillor Joshua Wells from City of Lincoln, and we have Councillor Rebecca Longbottom replacing him. We have Councillor Jimmy Brooks replacing the Lincolnshire County Council vacancy, and we have apologies from Councillor Ron Shepherd from North Lincolnshire Council, and no replacement. North East.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2. Have we any declarations of councillors' interests? Do any members wish to declare an interest? I will take no hands being shown as no declarations of an interest. We'll move on to item 3, which are the minutes of the previous meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which was held on the 28th of January of this year. The item here is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as a correct record. The minutes can be found on pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack. Any comments about? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very, very minor point, because I wasn't at that meeting, but I do notice in the members who were present, you've got Councillor Wells down twice as both a constituent member and a non-constituent member, and I think is only the non-constituent member. Yes. So thank you.
No, thank you. Somebody's ready to. Of course. With that amendment to be made...
Sorry, Chairman, that is the same for all the non-constituent members. We are named twice, both as constituent and non-constituent.
Okay, I'll look into that because I think it's a glitch in the software.
Considering that, do we have a proposer and a seconder once the amendment has been made? Councillor Smith as proposer, Councillor Bowles as seconder. Can we have a vote, please? Any against? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. 2 abstentions. Once they've been amended, I will sign it and put it on the public record. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 4, which is a chairman's announcement. On the 2nd of April this year, I was notified as the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of a key decision that needed to be made under a general exemption procedure, as the requirements of the forward plan advance notice of 28 days could not be complied with. I was informed by the interim monitoring officer about the Local Growth Fund, which is a government-funded scheme to support devolved areas with achieving their local growth plans. As a new authority, the production of a local growth plan is currently ongoing, with an evidence base already developed. In early March, the authority was contacted by the government to develop an outcomes framework for the local growth fund, but officers were waiting for guidance before placing an item on the board's agenda for consideration. The government is now seeking approval by the end of April so that the approach can be made and the first year's funding paid. Even though the detailed guidance to develop the outcomes framework is still not available, the report that will be going to the GLCCA on the 29th of April will ask the board to accept the funding and to agree to the high-level approach. This decision needs to be made urgently so that the approval can provide the government with the required response and approval. As such, I agreed that there did not need to be the 28 days timescale. Are there any comments on that? Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 5 of which is the housing strategy and pipeline update. This report, which is on pages 11 to 46 of the agenda pack, sets out the housing strategy and pipeline update, which was presented to the GLCCA Business and Infrastructure Board on the 25th of March of this year and will be considered at the authority meeting on the 29th of April. The recommendations that we ask of this committee are to review and comment on the attached report and endorse Part 1 of the Greater Lincolnshire Housing Strategy and endorse subsequent development of Part 2. Comments will be captured by our scrutiny officer, Tracy, for passing on to the GLCCA. The report will be presented by Helena, so I'll pass you over to Helena to make comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for opening with explaining how the report has been brought before the committee today. The housing strategy has been included as an appendix and explains how the combined authority will progress its role of investor, collaborator and influencer in relation to housing going forward, as well as initiating its strategic planning function by producing a spatial development strategy, working closely with local planning authorities and key stakeholders around Greater Lincolnshire. The paper also provides and explains the importance of a development of a strategic place partnership with Homes England and the progress being made in this regard. There are a number of stages that need to happen with that, and we are making very good progress. We're working towards a memorandum of understanding being signed later in the year, and also the housing pipeline work, which is now reaching conclusion, will form a really important, crucial part of this process. So, as we've already had shared, we'd like the committee to review and comment on the report, and obviously I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, if I may. The first one is in respect of brownfield sites and the delivery of these sites for housing. Is there specific funding available to facilitate this? And my second question is around improvements to the private rented housing stock. Do we have any plans to improve this particular sector? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take each question in turn. So, in relation to the brownfield sites, we have been awarded 34 million in terms of funding for Greater Lincolnshire as part of a brownfield land fund. It's still being formalised in terms of criteria by the government, so we're waiting for that. However, we are developing a process by which that will be put out to call for local authorities, developers, partners to apply for. So we're in the process of developing that, and you'll hear more about that very shortly. And on the private sector housing stock, recognise that at the moment nationally is going through some turmoil in terms of being able to be progressed at the speeds that we would like to see, investment we would like to see. We also need to consider viability issues. We need to consider our own place in terms of how that might work effectively. The idea in terms of the strategy, which we've brought to you today, is in part 2, which we will bring back in the summer, to look at specific programmes of which market housing might form a part. And there'll be a percentage of all of our programmes that will consider market housing, but it would differ depending on which part of Greater Lincolnshire and depending on the need in each area. So we will touch on that a lot more as our programmes develop. So hopefully that answers your question for now.
Yeah, it does, thank you. And I'd just like to thank the officers, Chair, for a very comprehensive and detailed report as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Walls.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 4 questions. Do you want me to fire them all off or do them in parts?
Go on then.
So my first question is on the delivery of the plan. So it's obviously it's great to have the plan and the pipeline. The concern is the delivery of it. So how confident are officers that the homes can actually be delivered within the timescales? And what do you see as the key risks to affecting that? Second question is on the affordability. Within the report, it highlights pressures within certain areas of the region around affordability and cost of living and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't, I can't see anywhere where it talks about sort of genuinely delivering affordable homes, particularly for younger people, those on lower incomes. So how will this process prioritise the areas with the greatest need, and what mechanisms are in place to secure that we have the right housing mix in the right places? Third question is on the infrastructure. As we all know as elected members, it's great, you know, having a plan to build your houses, but that's got to go hand in hand within, you know, the infrastructure. You know, I took great interest in the case study within the report around the STEP project in Gainsborough, given that I represent Gainsborough. You know, and that is going to be great for the town and the housing, but currently, if you want to get over the river from Nottinghamshire to Gainsborough at any tea time, you're sat in a 45-minute, an hour queue to do that. So what are we doing to ensure that everything is going hand in hand together and we can reassure residents of that? And then my final question is on the governance. We're being asked to scrutinise part 1 today and to sort of give the go-ahead to developing part 2 of the scheme. So can we just confirm what sort of ongoing scrutiny will be a part of that process so that members have a clear opportunity to shape part 2? And how will the progress against that delivery be reported back to this committee? Thank you.
Before I ask Alina to answer the first 3 on the scrutiny side of things, on the transport plan, the original transport plan was going to be 18 months, and we've asked for it to come back either to this committee every 3 or 6 months so that we get to look at it. So at that level, there'll be an ongoing scrutiny, which I would suggest will be the same for the housing plan. But I'll now hand over to Alina to answer that and the other 3 questions.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the delivery plan, obviously there are a number of homes that government has expected our area to deliver within a certain time frame. We all know that in the current climate that a lot of that has been rather unrealistic, but we are doing the very best we can with our local plans that already exist and also are being developed further, and obviously with our spatial development strategy as we start to evolve that as well. We will work with all of the local authorities in our area to look at what we can or can't progress realistically. We've already held 3 workshops with our local authority planning teams, and we will continue to do so throughout the process. So we obviously value all of the expertise that we have in the planning teams within our local authorities, and we recognise that in developing our spatial development strategy and our housing strategy as part of that, we need to work together. So that engagement piece will continue. In terms of will we be able to deliver all of them, I doubt we'll manage the numbers that we've been given as our local targets, but we will do our very best in establishing what targets we can. And obviously from a combined authority perspective, the whole point of the housing strategy is to look at which strategic investment ourselves and Homes England might look at to help support the activity that local authorities will already be delivering and continue to deliver in that space. So it is a case of partnership working and doing everything we can to achieve what we can. And having this strategy in place will help us really focus down on the areas of need. And I suppose that links in with your question about having the right housing in the right places and delivery of affordable homes to those who need them. We recognise that there is a need for affordable housing, but there is also a need, as rightly has been asked earlier, for market housing as well. And depending what area we're in, that balance can be quite different. So we need to be mindful of that. However, there is an affordable housing programme through government and through Homes England. We are talking to that affordable housing team on a monthly basis. We obviously work with our local authorities in terms of this space where a lot of the applications for affordable housing would come through anyway, but a large proportion of the pipeline schemes that we've been assessing have had a substantial percentage of affordable homes within them. So as part of our process and our evidence base, we've been identifying where affordable housing is needed and why. So hopefully that reassures you that we're using an evidence base to help with our decision making. On infrastructure, this is a tricky one because obviously it's working alongside transport colleagues, utilities providers, a whole range of partners across Greater Lincolnshire to make sure that we're looking at housing sites in that wider context. So all I can say is where we've been doing work on the housing pipeline, we've been identifying with our local authorities and local developers who are involved in the sites by talking to them, why the sites have been stalled, what opportunities there are in relation to moving them forward, and where there might be an issue around water provision or access or highways changes. We are aware of what they are for each site and why, and therefore we're halfway there to hopefully finding a solution, a workable solution, by working together as partners to achieve that. Now clearly we won't resolve every single site and we have to strategically prioritise, which is the whole point of the housing pipeline for us. But this pipeline will be used across a range of programmes. So as the combined authority evolves, it will look at a range of different housing programmes as highlighted within our housing strategy, and that will be provided in a little bit more depth when you get part 2 in the summer. And just to answer your final question, yes, absolutely, we will continue to come back to the Scrutiny Committee as part of an ongoing process as the strategy evolves and as delivery evolves.
Right. I need to go to Councillor Davison, then to Councillor Smith, then to Councillor Brooks, and then I'll get to Ruth. One quick question, though, about affordability. I did look at housing a few years ago, and I think the figures were, I'm really sort of stepping in here for my vice chair, and the affordability and mortgages, etc. Is a view that sort of 75% of the population could raise mortgages, therefore the rest were going to have to or elect to rent. Of that 25%, a significant minority would not pass any sort of form of credit checks to get tenancies. So, my concern from this report that we are setting up affordable houses that would put a significant risk, financial risk, against the providers of that, whether it's the council or housing associations, etc. Is that being considered?
In terms of looking at different aspects of affordable housing and whether it would work for certain parts of the community or not, we haven't gone into that depth analysis yet. Obviously, there will be evidence that we could look at in that regard if it was felt necessary. The sites that will be looking to prioritise may have affordable housing in them, but will clearly be strategic priority sites for the whole of Greater Lincolnshire. So I'm not sure. I think probably that evidence would be kept and captured more at local authority level than combined authority level. But it's probably a very useful one for us to understand.
Yeah.
So good to take away and to think about. I can say that we have been given funding for homelessness and rough sleeping for 3 years through government as a separate programme, and that will be one of the programmes we'll be telling you about as part 2 of the strategy. We're working with all of the homelessness teams right across the piece and some of the providers as well, registered providers and housing associations who work in this space. And we're hoping to come up with a strategy and a strategic approach in which we can help support that activity, but clearly not lead on it.
Yeah. I'm reassured on that one as a veteran, the number of ex-servicemen that end up homeless is an issue close to my heart. Councillor Davison, thank you for being patient.
No problem. Well, I'd like to thank officers for a very comprehensive report as well. It's very thorough. 3 of the questions I was going to ask have already been asked, actually. Touching first of all, though, on the infrastructure we need that supports this great explosion of housing, and the concern I've had now, I think I mentioned it last time, probably about Section 106. I think we really need a clear policy on how we're going to deal with developers who, well, specifically at outline stage when big promises are made in order to get outline planning permission, often in the millions, and then when you come to the actual reserve matters, possibly another developer's took the project over and they can't afford it. So the system is broken, and we're in a very unenviable position as planning authorities where if we refuse, it's very likely it'll be overturned by the planning inspector and costs awarded potentially against us. The system is broken, and I think we need to do something to try and steer government away from the current 106 that we have now, because it just isn't working. So that was the first point. Very important, because it's one of the reasons that all of our residents will state when they're lobbying us against large developments on the edges of their villages and towns. What about the doctors? What about the schools? So we really must address that hand in hand with the development we want to see. The other one I think that wasn't touched on is specialist and supported housing. Very important. I mean, I think across North Lincolnshire there basically isn't enough. We send an awful lot of our residents out of county, costs us a fortune. We need to make much more provision to support those people within the county. Thank you.
Alina. Yeah.
Thank you. So in terms of the specialist and supported housing, I'll start with that one. We recognise that there is a need in that space, and I know that the Mayor is very passionate at looking at doing a veteran housing scheme. We have been talking about 1 or 2 already, and we're working through some of the detail behind that. But there is other specialist housing, intergenerational housing, thinking about how we might work in a different way around the type of housing provision and tenure that we put within a site. And that wraparound care. We've been having a lot of discussions with housing associations about how some of them provide more than others, so how others might learn from best practice and share that best practice right across Greater Lincolnshire. So completely recognise your point, and yes, it should be considered as part of our programmes, and it will be. On the planning side, the only comment I would make on that, I don't disagree with what you've said, but there is a national planning policy framework review that's been taking place. The Combined Authority, alongside its local authority colleagues, put in quite a detailed response to that and made some very clear points where we think that should be addressed, and some of the points you've made perhaps should be addressed. So we'll wait and see what comes out of that post-consultation phase from government. But that we do recognise that at the moment the planning system does need further review, and certainly the government does, otherwise it wouldn't have proposed the framework to begin with. So we'll see what comes out in terms of capturing some of those responses they've been getting across the country. Does that help?
Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd also like to thank officers for putting this together. It is a very comprehensive report. Thank you. I have two questions. First one has been asked by a number of people already, and that was about the infrastructure that supports this. I'm pleased that you are advising that you will have regular updates on this, but Chair, I think you talked about the transport one. We'd agreed that that would be reviewed every 3 or 6 months.
Yeah.
I seem to recall we very much asked for it every quarter, every 3 months.
Yeah.
And I would certainly like this one to be quarterly. I think it's really important we get involved in that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Second question concerns the Veterans Village. I did 30 years in the mob, so I think I speak from experience here. I'd very much like to see the evidence that we've got for this. I recognise that I'm not going to see the locations, it's commercially, but the evidence that suggests that the Veterans Village is a good idea, I'd like to see that. And I'd really like to understand how we are going to administer it, who's going to live there, and the process by which military people live there. You know, are they living there on their own? That's what I'd like to see, because I think I could probably provide some information for you guys on that. Thank you.
Any response, Alina?
I was going to just come back because it was related to the point that you were all talking about of coming back from to scrutiny. So you are well aware that we are developing a performance framework, and under that performance framework, quarterly, you will be able to understand where the programmes and the projects and work programmes, I suppose, of the whole combined authority are. So you will be getting those reports and, you know, digging deep into that and asking us on progress on what we're doing on transport, on housing, or on skills, or other areas that we'll kind of consider. So the main mechanism that you will have is through that particular performance report, which will be both numerical and kind of qualitative, so you can kind of dig into that detail. And then from that, you will be able to see where you want to have a little bit more kind of detail. So I wouldn't want to make separate arrangements to come back with a housing strategy whilst it's kind of in development, because the main mechanism to do that would be through the performance report, was the point that I was going to kind of make. And then I'll let Alina answer the question on the Veterans Village.
In answer to that, as long as that we have some mechanism to delve down into it, and I presume that that's going to be based upon the corporate plan.
Yes, it's entirely. It's the corporate plan that was approved in December, and then we've had, through the performance reports, we've had workshops with each of the decision-making boards to see what KPIs they want to focus on and what does the work programme look like for the year. And then at your next scrutiny, you get to see that in its entirety, and then we press the button, and then you start to populate through the data and the qualitative kind of announcement. But that's the main mechanism of understanding. And if yes, anything that's within that, then you can say, we would like more detail on this particular kind of area.
How far on are we with the KPIs?
We have got employment and skills to go, which I think is on the 22nd of April. Then we will have done all of the KPIs. So they will be coming to your meeting in June, I think might be your next meeting. Can't remember.
Can I be cheeky and ask, after the skills meeting, we might have an addendum to share with the councillors, so we get a bit more notice than we would normally have from the next meetings.
A bit more notice. Yeah, so yeah, we can send out a work in progress. I think. Yeah. I just don't know when that will be at this particular point, but it will certainly be sooner than June. Okay.
Looking at the 3 new starters at the back, we are slowly filling the workforce.
Yes.
I'm very conscious that we are resource limited for a short period of time. Finally, Councillor Bowles was before, and then it's Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Chair, I think there's a response on the military village.
Sorry. Yes.
So in terms of the Veterans Village, unfortunately, because it's commercial in confidence at the moment, I can't share a lot of detail. But as soon as I am able to share more detail on the site and whether or not it's progressing, because obviously we need to do assessments in terms of viability, in terms of understanding the site and the wraparound care better. Your question around how the actual approach, and you'd be interested in hearing what that approach will be. it's certainly thinking about all aspects of that wraparound approach, not just building a house on a site and calling it a veterans village. So it's looking at it in that much broader context of health support, counselling, anything that might be needed to help support that development.
You've probably got the same
If
question.
I may, Chair, have a follow-up. I'm not looking for anything in that might be commercially sensitive. I'm looking for the rationale behind a veterans village. What evidence you have that supports the idea that a veterans village would be a good thing. You've stated in the paper here that existing evidence-based help guide will demand it. So I'd like to see that, because I think I have some questions specifically on grouping together veteran people in a village, and I would like to see what the rationale behind it. And I don't believe that that would be commercially sensitive.
Okay, well, in terms of looking at a site and a project in that regard, it would be done on a case-by-case basis. So first of all, we would look at each individual site and situation and understand the evidence behind where it's being located, why it's needed, why it would make sense to have it in that location, and however many homes and for what purpose. So it's looked at in that wider context, but it won't be the same for every single location. And in terms of looking at a village of this kind, it will be a pilot. So it's looking and learning from what works and what doesn't work. So it would be the first that the Combined Authority has ever worked on or with, and it's important that we are able to see and learn from that process. So there is no actual process set up at this stage beyond that, and we're working through it alongside a potential developer. But more details will be shared with the committee as and when it's possible. So absolutely.
I'll say working with, no, I bump into occasionally for veterans that are so traumatised, they roughly, well, no, they posh camp. They use the skills that they have got, and they won't commit to being in any brick building, small groups, etc. They just want to be on their own. The argument or the comment about it's a trial, there was a lot of work done after the First World War about veterans villages. There was subsequent ones after the Second World War, so there must be a body of evidence somewhere. I think we might be getting confused by the term village. I think we are looking at it as sort of 3,000-4,000 householders full with servicemen, whereas you seem to be pointing out, small clusters of supported accommodation.
As part of a wider development, and certainly not singled out purely as veteran housing. So I might add that as well. Yes.
I think we'll both watch this space, shall we? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's such an early stage. I don't feel I can share.
Yeah,
any
no.
more.
It's like I said earlier, it's something that's close to my heart. If we get it wrong, then servicemen will pay for it with their lives because they will take it. Shall we finish that one and move on? Now we've got Councillor Bowles that asked a question before we go to Councillor Wilson. Brooks, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
It's my eyesight.
No worries.
Yes.
I totally agree what's been said so far. And the term village for the veterans, I think that is a little bit misleading, because I was thinking they're just going to dump the veterans there. I support the veterans fully, and I thought we don't want to be putting them segregated out the way. So I'm glad you clarified that. Regarding the homes, I believe it should be couples and young families. That's what we should need to be targeting at, because obviously they're the ones that are struggling to get on the housing ladder. Obviously, Councillor Roberts isn't here at the moment, so we can't clarify a few things. But I know that if I was starting again, I wouldn't be able to afford a house at the moment, unless you have a mortgage for 40 years, which isn't really ideal. My question really was regarding infrastructure. It's about the A52 from Skeg to Boston, and the A158 from Lincoln to Skeggy again, because obviously the coastal roads are really struggling. I know it's on a different strategy, So I'm hoping that when the other strategy comes and it all goes to plan, that we look at doing the infrastructure first, because we just wouldn't cope if all of a sudden we've got loads of houses coming in. Thank you.
Councillor Wills. Oh, sorry. Would you like to respond to that?
Only just to say, absolutely, you know, where sites require access because the infrastructure needs addressing, then that is something that obviously needs to be considered. And there is definitely crossover between our strategies. Myself and Lana working together would make sure that that commitment is made to look at where a housing scheme requires a certain type of infrastructure that's highways related. Absolutely, we would look at that. In the same context, we would work with Anglian Water if there was a water issue, or we would work with National Grid or other providers in terms of resolving any power issues. So recognise your question, but yes, a very valid one.
Supplementary question?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just to clarify, would you be looking at doing the infrastructure first? Thank you.
Probably, because it wouldn't open up the site otherwise, so you couldn't actually progress it, and we've seen that on a lot of the stalled sites. So in the majority of instances, yes. I can't speak for every site, obviously.
Councillor Wilson, you have been so patient.
Yeah, I know. I've got 4 questions, but I'd like to ask them one at a time so I can come up with any follow-up questions from the answers, if that's okay. First one is provoked by a question earlier about the 106 money. My question is a community fund being considered instead of 106 money?
Helena or Ruth seemed anxious to answer that one.
Thank you. Yeah, so as a combined authority, we're not responsible for section 106, you know, that's local authorities. So it's a difficult space to kind of influence. So I can't comment on that particular question about whether we will set up a community fund. But we are well aware of the issues of section 106 and what a live topic that is in both in kind of bidding and then the reality. But it isn't currently something that is in our area of responsibility.
Thank you. The next question, if that's okay, on page 38. Can you tell me what evidence there is that we need a new town?
They're queuing up to answer that one for you.
I'll go first. At the moment, there isn't a large amount of evidence because that is the first part of the whole process that would need to happen. It won't be something that's developed quickly, and it shouldn't be. And it certainly wouldn't be on the scale of new towns that have nationally been approved through the new town process that government has in place. So it'd be something more to scale for Greater Lincolnshire, and clear evidence would be required in order to enable for that town to be chosen and progressed. And we are at that very early stage of how do we pull together the right evidence to help us do that and talk to the right people to identify where that site could or maybe should be. But definitely very early stages. So no location chosen at this point in time. Ruth, did you want to add to that?
Could I just, yeah. So Spittlegate, the barracks near Grantham, they were opened up from the MOD for development. I think it was mentioned 25,000 houses. Yeah. In my book, that's a new town. Yeah, but I believe the MOD wants that land back. Something about likely warfare, you know. Yeah. Sorry to butt in there.
Yeah.
On question 3.
Okay,
I don't need a response to that. You've answered it.
Supplementary on that then, Chair. This is a high-level strategy. There's no evidence for a new town. Why is it even in the strategy at this moment in time?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the government's agenda is new town. So we're responding to government's agenda. So we're not saying that we know exactly where a new town could be. What we're looking at and what we've commissioned is some very outline evidence to suggest, is there capacity, is there the right locational advantage for a new town in Greater Lincolnshire? for anybody who's been involved in that process of bidding into MHCLG, it's a very long process that you have to first establish the evidence and then you go through to put through for a new town. So it is worth exploring, and that's what we're doing at this particular stage. So setting out a kind of ambition to explore whether a new town, and a new town doesn't have to be a standalone, kind of new town in the middle of kind of nowhere. It can be a classed as, like Milton Keynes is a classic example where they were a new town and then they've had about 5 new towns connected into that existing kind of infrastructure. So it can be bolted onto an existing settlement, or it can be an individual new town in its own right. But we have to go through the process, quite rightly so, of what does the evidence tell us about what the capacity and the demand, very importantly, is for a new town in Lincolnshire. And that is the stage that we're at the moment.
Chair, I've got to say that, that as far as I'm concerned, it undermines the strategy, because the reason why I'm saying that is that I don't disagree about looking at the evidence and stuff like that, but that can be an addendum in the future or a revision in the future. You gather the evidence, and in the future, when you look at the strategy, you might change it in 2 years or whatever, and that can be included. Right now, there's no evidence. Why is it in the plan? I don't understand it, and I think it should be taken out. That reference, it's a distraction from the rest of the strategy. So I would recommend that should be looked at in the future.
How much of a mandate is it from central government to include that?
It's a very strong mandate, because if you work with MHCLG, yes, they're looking at affordable homes, yes, they're looking at, we're working with Homes England, but and you've heard the level of ambition of house building that local places have been set. This could be one of those solutions, and we are clear that we are looking at the evidence at this particular stage. We are not setting out a location or an aspiration for that to be a certain size. We're looking at the evidence, and so that will be updated, and Helena will be looking at that when you get the detail of the second phase or the second element of this structure. That goes into the delivery plan, so that's where you see a lot more kind of the detail.
Would removing it jeopardise funding?
It would jeopardise a signal to government and to other places that we were not interested in having a new town or new large-scale settlements. Yes, I think that would be the case.
Councillor Wilson, are you happy with that answer?
I hear what's being said, but I wondered whether it'd be in part 2 then, or something like that. Well, yeah. I can pass it over. I just think that a strategy should be there that lays out the foundations of what you're actually going to achieve. And at the moment, there's no evidence at all that the new town's needed. So it could be perhaps cleared up. I know what it says. I've read it, but any member of the public will say, "Oh, we're going to get a new town," yeah. And that's not the case, from what I've heard. So these are public documents. It's a public strategy. I just think we need to think about how other people view this.
Could we include in the report a degree of reticence from councillors? And then we will, when it comes back, we will subject it to more scrutiny.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chair. The next question is on page 44, scoring performer. At the top of the page, it's on the previous page, and at the top of the page it says they'll prioritise the most strategic, significant opportunities in an agreed scoring performer. And then if I go to the next page, the scoring performer is thematic area, planning status, delivery status, market demand, delivery timescales, potential outputs and outcomes. So can the officers explain to me where actually need comes into that?
Alina?
The housing pipeline has been scored through a whole series of processes. The performers have been extremely detailed. There's been a huge amount of consultation on it as well, and it's been ongoing for over a year. So I can absolutely wholeheartedly reassure you that need has been considered as part of that whole process, and evidence has been the very big starting point of the entire process as well. So before any proformas were scored, looked at, developed, that whole evidence report was provided for the whole of Greater Lincolnshire in a very thorough way, looking at over 600 sites. And those have been gradually narrowed down strategically and scored in different stages, involving discussions with planning authorities as well, to get to a point where we as Homes England and Combined Authority can strategically look at where we might move forward and support a small number of stalled sites in the next couple of financial years to begin with. That wider pipeline work and that wider evidence base will be used to inform all of our housing programme activity in different ways. So it won't be wasted work or investment, and it will look at all aspects of need, all aspects of infrastructure requirement, all aspects of utilities requirements, and will be then looked at depending on the problem or the issue in different ways, through different groupings and partnership working, or through getting advice in terms of individual schemes. So that pipeline work has been invaluable, but it has definitely looked at need and evidence behind those locations. I can assure you of that.
Thank you. I'm absolutely reassured that needs being taken account, but this is a high-level strategy, and he don't mention it.
I think in the fact that you're looking at sort of market demand and potential outcomes, you probably find embedded below that and the KPIs that you mentioned in the corporate plan that cover that. And I'm fairly certain that my vice chair, moving forward, would be very keen about demand because he'll want to sell them mortgages.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I've got one more question, if that's okay. On page 27, let me just get myself to it, sorry. It's got the corporate plan themes and principles about help shape our housing principles, which are as follows. So I'd just like the officers to explain a little bit more about section C, encouraging co-funding. That it'll prioritise schemes where there's co-funding. So it doesn't say prioritise need, it doesn't say prioritise certain sections of housing, it says prioritise co-funding. So I just want a broad outline of that. If that's all right.
Thank you. So that really means that one of the things that we look at in terms of assessing schemes is how much other funding is already there in place. So we have limited pots at the Combined Authority, and so therefore unlocking a scheme sometimes needs a small amount of money or sometimes needs upfront infrastructure. So one of the things that we will look at is how much of our resources would be required and how much resources may have already been committed by the private sector, by the third sector, by national government, and what does our kind of last bit of the jigsaw kind of contribute to unlock the whole development or add extra value. If you get a scheme that comes to you that has no resources whatsoever, we are unlikely to be able to afford it in its entirety and wouldn't be funding it 100%. So that is one of the criteria we look in terms of taking a scheme forward. And it's a really good indication of, kind of the commerciality and the deliverability of it as well.
I think of a snapshot of infrastructure projects that I've looked at in Lincolnshire. It's about 50% comes from external bodies. So I think that's just a realisation that we need money from third parties, probably central government, and that in itself will be driven by need. Whether it's central government's need or local need, that's a different question to ask.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I think that's me done for those questions.
Till the next policy.
Yeah, probably.
Councillor Collier, very patient.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I was patient, wasn't I? Okay, mine is a question and a comment, really. The first one is regarding to the housing. My colleague here, Councillor Brooks, didn't say about affordable housing for families. I'd like to know there's a balance there as well. I'm reading today there's a shortage of one-bedroom properties. We have a lot of people that don't marry for whatever reason, and they want to get on the housing list, you know, on the property ladder. So I'd like that to be considered as well as affordable properties for older people as well. Lincolnshire has a high population of older people moving here, and they're looking for properties that are manageable for them as well, even one bedroom there. So if you want to answer me that, and then I'll come back with the other comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you raised that, because the evidence was telling us very similar things. And it's certainly a conversation we've been having, particularly with some of our housing associations who've done specific schemes in that regard. And in fact, one of them was award-winning in terms of looking at still providing a bungalow type of property, and that there is still need for that type of provision in some places. So it's recognising that in different locations, again, there will be different needs. But certainly the evidence is saying that one-bedroom properties are required and something to be thought about as part of a wider development. So thank you.
Thank you for that. So it is being considered. It is being considered. That's good to hear. Thank you. The other thing, I'm here in Lincoln itself, in the city. My area is deemed to be a deprived area, Birchwood. We're getting this up to £20 million grant coming to us when it arrives next year, I believe now. But we have a wonderful diagnostics centre built here in Lincoln now. There's no transport to it, though, for my residents in Lincoln, in Birchwood. And it's a deprived area, so we have fewer cars there and quite a lot of ageing people as well. You know, you go to a diagnostic centre, which is a wonderful centre. You go there for a reason, and it's a long walk from the nearest bus stop. And I just wondered why that wasn't put into place beforehand. This is the cart before the horse type thing again, you know. Why wasn't it even considered that transport was needed down that long road down there to this centre? Just wondered if that's being looked at, please. I have asked before about this. Thank you.
Can I interject there? Because I was involved with the procurement and build of the CDC. It was asked. Yeah, they're doing the one at Boston as we speak. Transport was asked at the very, very beginning. So, you know, how it wasn't formalised, I don't know, but yeah, it was asked at the inception of those projects.
There's certainly no transport coming from Birchwood anyway, as far as I'm aware, and I use the buses myself. So.
Part of the role of the combined authority is to think about how public transport works effectively alongside housing, particularly where any new housing development takes place, but also if we're looking at existing housing as well, or retrofit of that. I'm going to hand over to Lana, who is probably best placed to answer your question as our transport lead.
Or we could leave it till item 9.
Happy to take it now. I think probably a standalone item.
Yeah.
All I would say is that, as you say, it was sort of 2 years ago, I suppose, when this was being considered as a site, sort of before the combined authority. So I can't really comment on the ins and outs of the kind of consent process as to that went through, and in terms of transport provision to that site. But what I would say is that we are aware that there is an issue here, and that you're right that there is no bus service that currently serves Beaver Street or serves that diagnostic centre, and is a struggle in terms of accessibility if you don't have access to a private car. And I am aware that not ourselves as the combined authority at the minute, but I do know that the county council are in conversations with one of the bus providers to try and find a solution to this particular problem. But but acknowledging that this should have been prioritised at the start in terms of access as opposed to retrofitting a solution now.
Skegness is even worse to get to.
I just want to say thank you for that, but I hope lessons are learnt from these sort of things moving forward when you are considering these new buildings, etc., etc. We've got several big housing projects around us in the Western Growth Corridor there, and we've got houses or bungalow mix of properties being built right behind me on Jasmine Green there. And all this is going to go into our doctors. You know, they're overloaded and they're overworked. It's a worry.
And absolutely, yes, lessons will be learnt from this. And I think what I would say is that from a combined authority strategic level, where we're now in the position where we'll be aligning our local transport plan with our spatial development strategy. So we are setting the tone right from the top in terms of that strategic direction. So if we can establish that policy position at a strategic level, then at a delivery level for local planning authorities and housing authorities, that's kind of already the established position, I suppose, across Greater Lincolnshire.
Yeah. One final thing about the single bedroom flats, etc. I live near Woodall Spa. There's been a number of evictions because of, and it's pensioners that have been evicted because their houses don't currently meet the criteria to be rented. And as pensioners, they don't meet credit criteria. So they are really struggling now to find flats, and certainly none in Woodall Spa. So yeah. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I just spotted another question as I was reading through, listening to the answers. On page 25, it talks about government funding, and it mentions empty homes, that there might be government funding for empty homes. And empty homes, anybody that's interested in empty homes, we know there can be a blight in a community. Not all empty homes like that, but significant ones can be a real blight, attracting all sorts of antisocial behaviour and rats and pests and all sorts. So the question is, because it's in the strategy, the question is what is the capacity of the authority in relation to empty homes, and how it might apply for funding to do that across the Lincolnshire?
Alina.
At this moment in time, there is no funding for the combined authority to lead on empty homes specifically. We would work with our local authorities in supporting, looking at initiatives that might help with the problem. But in terms of actually having any delegated responsibility from government at the moment, that hasn't been the case. However, we are having a lot of areas, and I mentioned homelessness being one already, being delegated to the combined authority from government, and it may be that empty homes is one area, because you are correct, it is a big problem nationally, not just in Greater Lincolnshire. Might be another one where the combined authorities are asked to look at potential solutions and work with local authorities in that space to find a way in which to deal with the issue in a collaborative way. We haven't had anything of that nature thus far, but we recognise that it is something as part of housing provision, and looking at strategic housing provision we can't ignore. So from our perspective, it would be more about what strategically can we do to help support local authorities in that space, rather than actually dealing directly with the homes themselves at this point in time.
My memory may mislead me, but I'm sure about a decade ago there was an initiative to try and open up flats above shops in the city centres. I presume nothing came of that.
There was an initiative, and local authorities were able to apply for funding. There's been a number of different ones. There's been one through Heritage, and funding through that route and converting the upstairs of retail spaces. There's been specific funds through other routes as well in the past. But as a combined authority, we haven't been given anything specific to date.
Can I come back on that answer, Chair? So, under the title, government funding, I'll just read it out to save everyone reading it. It says, there is an array of government funding that has been created or adapted to support the government's ambition to develop 1.5 million new homes. Homes England, as the government's housing and regeneration agency, is the principal partner, in mobilising this investment and provides a suite of programmes that local authorities, combined authorities, and I'm emphasising the word combined authorities, and development partners can draw upon to accelerate delivery across all tenures. And then Empty Homes is in that. So it's a little bit, at the moment, it's a little bit ambiguous in the strategy, when actually the combined authority doesn't have. This is a combined authority strategy thing, but yet we don't have any of that, or very little of it. There's a list of things there. I'm wondering how many things that actually is local authority and how many things are combined authority here. So we need to focus on what we can deliver in the strategy. I'm sorry to be negative, but why is it in there if we've not got responsibility?
I'll hand you over to Alina. I would suggest that if there's money there, we'll find it.
I have to say that the Business and Infrastructure Board specifically asked for empty homes to be considered as part of the strategy. It was one of their recommendations in the March board for us to think about that. In terms of Homes England having part of their remit in relation to empty homes, that's correct. But not everything that Homes England does, the combined authority absolutely has to as well. And it will be a case of part of our strategic place partnership working together and working through, knowing the housing pipeline we have and the sites that we have and have identified as areas of need. If we feel empty homes is an initiative that needs to be considered as part of a programme or a particular site development, then of course we would consider it. But at this point in time, we have no specific funding as a combined authority to deliver against that programme, and we do not have a policy per se, but we recognise as part of the strategy that it's something we should be thinking about. And strategically, this strategy helps us identify those areas that we, through our evidence base and through our board discussions, as we have today, identify key things we should be thinking about or find important for our area when it comes to housing. So that's why it's listed, and I agree it is an important issue, but at this moment in time we don't actually have a specific policy in terms of, or funding to deliver something specific in that space.
But if it wasn't in, you'd be asking why it wasn't in.
Chair, I probably would. I won't deny that because it's an important issue.
Yes. Yeah.
But what I was trying to drill down to is exactly what the strategy is getting at. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
And that was a great answer. It's just the layout of how this strategy is written doesn't give me that answer, does it? And it doesn't give the public that answer. And it sounds, and I just want this confirming, it sounds like the authority does have a responsibility in somewhat for empty homes. It just hasn't got the policy now, and it hasn't got the funding to do anything about it. And at the minute, it's early doors, and the councils will still be doing that. That's how it sounds. I just want that confirming.
Before the meeting, I was having a conversation with officers. The authority is still quite embryonic. A lot of things are to be roped in. The earlier conversation we had about sort of 50% of our funding comes from external points. And I see Ruth wants to.
I was just going to re-emphasise the point that the housing strategy is the housing strategy for the place, so for the whole of Greater Lincolnshire. So this is other local authorities as well as the combined authorities. So local authorities may well get directly empty homes funding to be able to do something. It's just a list of the types of funding that is available should we choose to want to leverage them. but that might not be the combined authority. We work in partnership with the local authorities in the area of housing. This is not exclusively something that is entirely exactly what only the combined authority is doing. It's about what we do in partnership with the housing authorities and local partners in order to take forward housing at a strategic level rather than a very specific. And as Helena has said, a lot more of this detail will be in the second phase, which is the delivery phase. This is the high-level strategy. So I think if it wasn't in there, it would be wrong not to kind of have it in there too.
I agree it should be in. Yeah. I absolutely agree it should be in. But from the first answer, it sounded like, it shouldn't be in from the answer. And I just think there does need to be a focus from all parties, including the authority, to tackle empty homes, because we know if you're living next door to one, joined on, your house could be all damp down one wall, there could be rats in there, it can be a right nightmare, and people shouldn't have to live like that. Yeah. And if we can get them back into use, it is the main thing. So
some authorities have actually got enforcement actions to force owners and landowners to bring them back into. Councillor Collier.
Thank you. There's just something came to mind then talking about empty houses. What about a little while ago, or a few years ago now, I think it was, with this bedroom tax they called it, didn't they? If you had an extra room that you weren't using, they stopped some of the benefits for residents. Instead of doing that, is there consideration actually to give people incentive to move, so it would free up like 2 and 3 bedroom houses, and they'd go into a smaller home perhaps, instead of kind of being forced into it? Because you have a lot of people in a big home on their own, can't afford to go into a smaller, because often the rent is dearer as well in the smaller places. So I just wondered if there's something it could be considered there, some incentive to help people, encourage people to downsize that are in the renting sector at the moment, to free up bigger homes for families.
There was a policy. Certain other authorities certainly, but it floundered because there was a lack of, it was in Lincolnshire because most of the developers were doing 4-bedroom houses. Yeah, and the reason that the initiative faltered was because there wasn't a sufficient market of. I'm impressed my memory's going back that far. Yeah, so yeah, it has been thought of. I don't think there's any live policies about it now.
No, there isn't, and it's a sort of conversation as a combined authority I suppose we would have with government and with Homes England in particular. So it'd be more the role of influencer rather than delivery role, but it's certainly a good point to raise again and so thank you for that.
Yeah. Any other questions? Right, now Tracy knows why I asked her what her shorthand speed was, and the 3 at the back now, they're not going to come to any committee meeting that involves house building. So, ask you all the points that we've mentioned. Helena, could I ask you to review them and include them in the strategy going forward? When it comes back here, we'll consider them again. Can I ask for a show of hands of all the people that think we should include those in the report going forward? Any abstentions?
Chair, just one that I don't agree with, and that's the village concept. I think it should be in.
I think the definition of the term village is the sticking point there.
Probably so.
Yeah.
I think we need to explore it. We need to go
Yeah.
down that route, not just can it.
Chair, it was the Newtown assessment for me. I'm just worried about the assumption that the entire committee feels that shouldn't be in the strategy. I'm pretty relaxed about that being in there and that concept being properly assessed.
Having seen the MOD being forced to give up 14 sites, you can see that central government were fixated on the idea of new towns. I think funding will probably follow that, but I agree with what you said, that a definition of a new town, whether it's like Spittlegate, which is effectively Grantham Overspill. If they ever decide to do something with Scampton, because of its location, it would be effectively a new town, because you would have to put the infrastructure in. I think it will come to the planning officers, and as part and parcel of coming here with subsequent iterations of the plan, I don't think the officers can actually leave it out. I think we could put comments in it to say that the Scrutiny Committee were not in support of the title. If that...
Well, I think the terminology in the report is about an assessment of new towns.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly happy for that to be in the strategy.
Okay.
I think that's an important part of the strategy.
Yeah. Any other questions? Shall we move on to something probably more contentious? Pay policy. Thank you very much for your patience, your questions, and your very, very informative answers. Thank you. So, moving on to item 6, which is the GLCCA pay policy. This report is on pages 47 to 54 of the agenda pack and invites the committee to consider the GLCCA's pay policy statement, which is due for consideration by the GLCCA at its meeting on the 29th of April. Recommendations we're asking for is that the committee reviews it and endorses the pay policy statement and recommend it to the Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority for its approval. Any comments should be will be captured by our Scrutiny Officer Tracy for passing on to the GLCCA. But the report will now be presented by Debbie Simpson, the interim Section 73 officer. Debbie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alina.
This report presents the pay policy of the Greater Lincolnshire Combined Authority for consideration and approval. It's been prepared in accordance with the Localism Act, which requires the authority to approve a pay policy statement on an annual basis. It sets out the authority's approach to remuneration, including senior management pay. Members are asked to approve its adoption for the forthcoming year. Thank you.
Any comments? Councillor Collier.
Thank you, yes. I just wonder, it's saying senior roles, it was section page 51, 7.8. Senior roles remuneration, performance rated. How is that measured? What is it measured upon, please?
I think that's still to be decided. We'll have to bring details at the back. As far as I'm aware, right, so there is just clarified, discussions are that would be based on the KPIs, so it'll relate to performance outcomes.
Right, but I don't quite understand how you measure that.
So when we were talking about the corporate plan and then setting key performance indicators against each of the elements within the corporate plan, KPIs would always be measurable. They would always be kind of smart targets that you should be kind of measuring. And so they will be set out in a numerical kind of fashion. So an example for maybe mine might be increasing the number of levels of inward investment into Greater Lincolnshire. And so I would track during the year inward investment levels, so companies moving in here and whether they had then invested. And at the end of the year, you would be able to say what the performance on that would be. So each of them would have that element. And you will see a lot more of that when it comes through in the corporate plan, and you'll see the KPIs connected with them.
Sorry, Councillor Bowles was...
Thank you, Chairman. It's on point 11, relating to bonuses. It says the GLCCA operate a bonus scheme for the Chief Executive and S73. So I guess my question is, could somebody give me some examples of what the Chief Executive might earn a bonus for? Because I don't really understand that. And 15 years as a council, I don't think I've ever unless it's happened and I don't know about it. I've never really come across a chief exec getting a bonus. Where is that scheme? How can I see it? And finally, why do we operate a scheme that only applies to the highest earner in the organisation and isn't applicable across all members of staff?
I'll hand you over to Ruth.
Thank you. As we were moving from a temporary organisation into a permanent organisation, the Appointments Committee made a recommendation that they wanted to adopt key performance indicators and a performance culture, and therefore they set bonuses in meeting the KPIs that would be decided by the the Appointments Committee annually as part of the appraisal process. And they capped those within the job advert, so it's a certain kind of percentage of uplift, which I haven't got to hand at this particular point. And so they wanted to reflect this private sector culture of understanding and aspiring ambitions to, meet those key performance indicators. So we are developing so this is all very recently. You may know that we're kind of going through that process of transferring from a temporary structure, an interim structure, into a permanent structure. So the HR leads are looking at a policy to support that decision that was made by the Appointments Committee.
Come back on that, Chairman. I get that answer in the corporate world. I don't agree with that in these situations, and it still doesn't answer my question about why it's only available to the highest employee. If we're looking at the KPIs that the chief exec hits, let's be honest, that's going to have been delivered by other members of staff. So why are they not eligible for those bonuses? I can't support a policy that discriminates against employees in that manner.
Having worked in both the private sector and the public sector, my KPIs when I was an executive were quite literally aircraft on time, etc., that were contributed specifically to financial output. In the NHS, it was more difficult, well, I would say impossible, but those KPIs cascaded down and were linked to the bonuses for people at lower levels. Those bonuses have now gone, so they're going away from the public. So I can see where they're trying to get at, but I share Councillor Smith's sort of shaking of the head to say how you do it in the public sector. Over to Ruth.
I'm not going to kind of respond to that in any particular way. This is a decision of the Appointments Committee. Yeah. We're working through how we can make that happen. It is, that is a comment that the Scrutiny Committee can add to this particular pay policy paper. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson. There's a smile on your face.
Thank you, Chair. It's on the same thing, basically. I agree with what's been said, but I would put it a slightly different way. You've got a chief executive who, what we're saying, because we've heard about signalling earlier on in a different thing, about signalling, and we're saying we've got a chief exec that won't perform to his top ability unless we put a bonus in front. I just don't get it. I absolutely don't get that. If we can't get a chief exec that performs to his best of his ability for the authority and public service, then we need to get rid of him, get another one. And the same with the senior officers. And so I absolutely, on them grounds, do not agree with giving bonuses to those highly paid staff that are supposed to be self-motivating, inspirational, leading, and driving performance of the whole authority and whole agenda. I just don't agree with it. I think it's a mistake.
I'll hand it over to you, but I don't think you can answer that question.
Apart from the aspiration of the Mayor and the members of the Combined Authority and the Appointments Committee was absolutely to drive, really aspire to have a very high-performing Combined Authority and to set the right environment and enable to do that through both recruitment practices and, performance indicators. And that has been an aspiration to, bring an element of the private sector into working in the local government world. That is the aspiration and that is the thinking behind it.
Follow up?
Chair, I absolutely hear that. However, even with that said, I think my comment, and just listening to other people on the Scrutiny Committee as well, that we ought to make a comment saying we don't agree with this appointments committee, and that the leading officers should have that self-motivation and should be leaders of place, and the salary should reflect that.
Shall we ask the other two questions? Councillor Collier was... No?
Thank you, Chair. It's kind of on the same lines, really. Yeah, I agree. All staff should be on some kind of performance-related pay, and not just the top, basically, if we're going to do it that way. The question is, though, who sets the KPI targets? And is it do they have an input on it?
So there's a whole process involved in corporate reform, performance, and therefore the KPI targets. So we have, and you have already received at one of your previous meetings, the outline of what the corporate performance framework looks like and what it will focus on. What we've been working on with each of the decision-making boards in the last couple of months is what are those KPIs and what are the level of those KPIs. And so that will all come to a conclusion in the summer, and that goes through scrutiny, and then goes through the boards, and then ends up at the next combined authority meeting for approval. And so there's been constant kind of engagement in shaping these since we approved the corporate plan in December.
On other boards, non-executive directors set those KPIs, and the board meeting where the KPIs are refined to generate those bonuses do get very heated, because that is an avenue to, the KPIs can be made quite onerous or quite easy. I would suggest we wait until the June meeting, see those KPIs, and then make a comment. But from this meeting, say that we'll see on the vote that a majority of people do not think there should be bonus arrangements. Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree. I think it is a matter of regret that the Appointments Committee feel that the only way that this can be a high-performing authority is through the payment of cash payments for performance. I think there are other ways of achieving a high-performing authority without bonus payments, and I would support a request that they do reflect upon that decision.
I think Councillor Wilson wanted one more comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If this is a fait accompli, I know we've got a comment going forward, but if it is, then could I suggest that actually there's been research that say that if you can achieve 60% of your bonus on average, that actually stimulates high performance, because you've got them stretch targets. You are achieving the targets, but you've got even further stretch targets that you get. So one year you might get 80%, but then you increase your stretch targets, and next year you might get less, and it averages out about 60%. I'm just wondering, within the authority, if they've even discussed how a performance, I know they've discussed KPIs, but how, what the actual targets and stretch targets will be, and what's expected of the bonus. I'm just wondering if those discussions have taken place.
As far as I'm aware, that will be incorporated into the policy that kind of governs this. So which is being worked through with HR at this particular point. You know, hasn't been stress tested, hasn't kind of been taken through, but it's part of the consideration. So they're really helpful comments. Thank you.
Councillor Davison.
I'd just like to see the policy before we make a decision, to be quite honest. I come from the private contracting world. I'm quite used to performance-related pay, setting of objectives and bonuses.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in local authorities. I have actually been calling for it in our own, right down to the lowest level in terms of setting objectives and rewarding
Cascading
high
down
performance.
the objectives, yeah.
So, and equally, having the mechanism to not reward good performance. So it works both ways. So I think before we make any comments, from my personal point on this scheme, I'd like just to see how it's going to function.
All I know is that when the plane crashed, I didn't get a bonus. Yeah. Right. Any other comments? So I'm going to propose that it says here that we endorse it. I don't think, from what is said on the floor, that we can actually endorse it in its current form, that there are queries about performance-related pay and how that links to KPIs. Is that a fair statement? Are you happy to endorse the policy in a majority, subject to a review of what would be paragraph 13? We're happy to endorse a majority of the policy, subject to that review of, I think it's paragraph or item 13 on the document about performance-related pay. Are we all in agreement about that? Can I have a show of hands, please? Well, yeah, sorry, 11. Apologies. Yeah. Yeah. How many in favour? 5, 6. Abstentions? Against? 1. Thank you very much. We move on to item 7. What could be more contentious than housing than transport? Yeah. Rural Transport Group. The report, which is on pages 55 and 62 of the agenda pack, invites the committee to consider the report on the Rural Transport Group, which was presented to the GLCCA Transport Board on the 1st of April of this year. Recommendation to the committee are we review and comment on the attached report and support the development of the Rural Transport Group. The report will be presented by Lara Meddings, the Interim Strategic Transport Lead. Lana, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an overview of the successful launch of the new mayoral Rural Transport Group and sets out the next steps in its development. The group, which was launched in Westminster in January, brings together councils, government departments, transport bodies and MPs to lead the national conversation on the unique transport challenges facing rural areas. The report to the board highlights the themes emerging from that first meeting, such as demand-responsive transport, bus franchising, data and sharing best practice. It outlines the work now underway to establish a platform for shared learning and to shape the group's priorities for the year ahead. The committee are asked to note the progress made so far, and officers welcome feedback on what the Rural Transport Group's priorities should be and the themes for future agendas as we develop the work programme, which will go for future approval through the Transport Board. Thank you.
Any questions from the floor? One from Councillor Brooks. One?
Just one. Thank you, Chair. Looking at the report, thank you for that. For me, it's like that. This is where I think it needs to be focusing. The 56A stagecoach service in Bowling Marsh was removed during COVID, and it won't be returned due to costs. Despite a petition of 343 signatures from residents, the current 56 service does not go past any doctors, which is affecting older residents and people needing to see the doctor. What can the authority and the Rural Transport Group do to address this? Thank you.
Lana.
So yeah, thank you for that question. I think that particular question is a role for Transport for Greater Lincolnshire, and it's a role for the Combined Authority as we develop our local transport plan. What the Rural Transport Group is a national platform, so it's a mayoral group which is attended by all of the mayors with a rural interest. So whilst I think local issues will be escalated up to that group, I think specific local issues need to be addressed by the Combined Authority and by the Transport for Greater Lincolnshire group, which we've set up, which I think is touched upon in one of the other papers. So hopefully that answers.
I think it's the next one. Yeah. If you could, yeah, because the strategic one, this one, as you say, is the one that hopefully brings in money from Westminster. The next one will be addressing routes past doctors, getting to the CDCs, etc. Give a granularity as to how it will. What I'm interested to see is how the two will dovetail together. Sorry, Councillor Bowles.
Sorry. Yeah, it's just a question on the resourcing of the group. The report says that there's no financial and resource implications. So I guess my question is it how is it being resourced? Is that coming from somewhere else to resource it? If it's mayors from all over, is it being resourced centrally rather than us?
So to date, there's been limited resource implications, as in we launched the group in Westminster, which was given to us from the MP that sponsored it, so in terms of that hosting of it. And going forward, our next meeting will be hosted by DFT, so again, there's no significant cost implications on the Combined Authority other than officer travel time to attend that meeting and officers kind of administering that particular scheme. I think members who will maybe be aware of the Urban Transport Group, which is a paid up group, so each of the members who sit on that group actually put funding into the ongoing costs of that. That's not something we've investigated at this stage. We're very much in its infancy and building the Rural Transport Group, but not saying that's not something that we could look at further down the line.
Any other? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I've got a simple question, but I might have a follow-up question as well. I've read the document, and it just refers to a transport group. And I just want some clarification. Is this just public transport, or is it a wider remit?
My interpretation was it's a wider one. It's dovetailing all. Even if you manage to get balloons in there, it's incorporated in that.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's a wider remit, Chair. Then I think that the road infrastructure for rural Lincolnshire, it could. I think getting across Lincolnshire is difficult.
Yeah.
And that they're asking for ideas. I think that should be a priority about.
Which is why my comment was about dovetailing, because the transport group at that level, not only does it go to the local transport groups, but it ties into infrastructure, even housing needs.
Yeah.
Because if we put in additional housing or a new town, dare I say it, we will end up with new bus routes or different transport mediums, etc.
And could I ask the officers what influence it will have on like rail services and things?
That's a good question. Catching a train in Lincolnshire.
Thank you for those comments, and absolutely road infrastructure will need to be considered. It's a rural transport group for any transport issues that are impacting on our rural areas. So we are representing the rural area of Greater Lincolnshire, but all national rural areas are sat on this group. In terms of influencing rail services, there's absolutely, I think, a role for this rural transport group. It's if you've got a collection of multiple mayors who are all saying the same thing, then that gives us a greater influence when it comes to having those discussions with what will be Great British Railways going forward. DFT attend the rural transport group, so I think that is the biggest kind of influencing position that we have there, is in we have those people in the room to be able to have those direct conversations with. I think the purpose of looking at the forward plan for this group is that we could have a session which is rail focused, and so therefore we could invite specific rail experts and sort of rail ministers from the DFT to come to that meeting and hear that collective voice and those collective opinions.
Could I only ask one request if there is a meeting like that? Not that I attend, because I don't want to, but can we avoid the fixation with getting quicker links to London? Yeah, most people are worried about getting across Lincolnshire. They don't want to go to London. Yeah. Any other comments? Oh, Councillor Wilson again.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased with the answer, and I'm leaving that at that. But I've got another comment. From memory, and I didn't research what I'm going to say as well, that actually the national cycling routes are pretty rare in Lincolnshire as well. So I'm just wondering whether, you know, active travel is going to be a consideration, you know, in rural Lincolnshire, getting from village to village, especially for youngsters and such like. So, you know, I think there's only a couple of, from what I remember, only a couple of like national cycle routes, and I know there'll be other local ones, but I think it should be a priority.
Well, I'm very fortunate in the National Cycle Route 1 goes right past my front door. However, I wouldn't take a push bike along that bit of road, because so far this year there have been 5 wrecked wheels because of the potholes on that bit of road. So yes, I endorse your comment about cycling. You know, Lincolnshire is a glorious place. It's almost, well, it's New Holland. What better place to have cycleways?
And if I may comment, Chair, if you cycle in the Wolds, it's absolutely lovely.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
You know, it's hard work because you're going up hills, there's no two ways about it, but I think it's an opportunity for like tourism and things like that. But, you know, people want safe roads, don't they, and safe opportunities. So just, my comment is it should be, because that's what it's asking for, should be in there.
Yes. A combined rural transport group, which is what we've already discussed. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Any further questions? Are we... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I don't know whether this comes under your remit here. I'm not quite sure. I'm thinking about the bypass. Would that come under your remit here? The accidents that keep happening between the Skellingthorpe Road and the Doddington Road. Serious one a couple of weeks ago. Someone was killed. And this, well, hardly a month goes by when 1 or 2 accidents don't happen. We become very aware of it because the traffic is then diverted through Birchwood, and it causes chaos, gridlock in fact. Is this being looked into? What can be done? It's a section that wasn't made into a dual carriageway. It goes from a busy, very busy dual carriageway into this narrow bottleneck where everybody's trying to overtake the lorries in particular to get in front. And it's very, very dangerous. I myself have nearly been involved, not my doing or my fault, someone rushing to get out. So I just wondered if that's something that's been, it seriously needs looking into. I've spoke to and had a reply from Hamish Faulkner MP for Lincoln, and he is bringing it up as well. But I'm having residents saying now something really needs to be done about this bit of bypass there. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the 1st of April, the combined authority became the Transport Authority. So absolutely part of that is considering our road network. So working with, in this instance, Lincolnshire County Council, both as the as delivering the transport services on our behalf, and also as the Highways Authority, it would be them that we would be working with in terms of identifying any accident black spots across the county and looking at any potential measures that could be put in place. So I think our role as the combined authority, where at the current position, is that we would be looking at where we would be directing funding, whether any interventions are needed in terms of road safety. So that's certainly a conversation I can pick up after this meeting with Lincolnshire County Council as the Highways Authority, absolutely.
Good luck in dealing with the Highways Department. I'm trying to fight them to a standstill myself and I'm having no luck. Right. Any other questions? Right. Are we comfortable? Can we propose that the committee has reviewed the report and supports the development of the rural transport group and request the officers to take into account the comments that have been raised? Can I have a show of hands, please? Unanimous. Well, Councillor Wilson was left the room, so for this one, but thank you. That's agreed. Item 8, the Greater Lincolnshire Local Transport Plan Programme Update. The report, which is on pages 63 to 70 of the agenda pack, invites the committee to consider a report of the Greater Lincolnshire Local Transport Plan Programme Update, which presented to the GLCCA Transport Board on the 1st of April. The recommendations to the committee are to review and comment on the attached report, support the development of the Greater Lincolnshire Local Transport Plan and endorsed engagement strategy, and we'll invite Lana to present on this matter. Thank you, Lana.
Thank you, Chair. This report updates members on the programme to develop the first Greater Lincolnshire Local Transport Plan as required of the new Local Transport Authority. Since the Transport Board last endorsed the work programme, officers from across the constituent councils have been working together to progress the 8 stages of the plan. The report sets out current progress and the proposed next steps. This includes proposed early engagement activities, including stakeholder workshops, an online survey and a public-facing transport roadshow. This will enable the combined authority to gather the views of as many people as possible, and this will inform the next stage of the local transport plan policy development. Members are invited to review and comment on the programme and to support and comment on the proposed engagement strategy.
Any comment from members? Oh, sorry. Councillor Bowles.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions on the engagement, please, and then just a couple of other comments generally. Just on terms of paragraph 9, it states the survey will seek a deeper understanding of rural transport needs. I'm just a bit concerned that's narrow. Surely we should be undertaking transport needs of the whole county. Why does it specifically refer to rural? So if we could look at that. And then my second point is on member engagement in terms of councillors. Will a formal mechanism be put in place for the members of the upper tier, the constituent members? I'm not here to represent county council today, but I am a county councillor. So will a system be put in place for upper tier members to be able to input formally into this process, formally provide input on the transport needs in our divisions, which has been alluded to by a number of members here today, we all know very well because it's what we get battered with day in, day out. So will there be a process for us to do that as members? So they're my 2 questions, and then just a couple of, I think you've probably already answered this one, Lana. It was, my concern about the lack of ambition for rail. You've touched on it yourself, Chairman. It doesn't seem a very ambitious strategy. Without sounding too harsh, it's pretty much the status quo. Where can we get better with that? Well, I think you've already answered that about some ideas you've got there. And then my second sort of comment and concern is around the references and the work of Midlands Connect. From my experience, they focus on the major urban centres and they don't currently represent the whole of Greater Lincolnshire. So how do we ensure that representing the whole of the county in that respect, if we're leaning on people like that who don't represent you know, the north of the county at present, how are those matters being covered? Thank you.
I'll jump in on that one. I'll link up to your previous one about the Birchwood and buses not going past doctors. I live on the cycleway that's at the other end of the spectrum. There are 40 houses on a 4-mile stretch of road. It's a mile and a quarter to the walk to the nearest bus stop. 75–80% of all the people on that road are pensioners, and there is no provision for transport other than cars. You know, so it's if we are looking at a strategy across the county, you've got your two extremes there. You satisfy both of those, and you've probably got a workable system. Lana, would you like to answer? No, she says.
Absolutely. Firstly, on the reference to rural, absolutely, that needs amending to reflect it's not just rural, it's all of Greater Lincolnshire, recognising that we have more built-up urban areas as well. So absolutely, that can be changed. In terms of engagement with members of all authorities, I think the strategy sets out in terms of online surveys, the in-person roadshow, and Transport for Greater Lincolnshire. But if it's felt that a specific kind of strand is required specifically to capture those comments of members, if those kind of avenues are not appropriate or would not be able to capture those comments, then we can look at a specific area where members could provide their feedback. That's not a problem. In terms of rail, so what I would say is that we're developing the local transport plan, but what will sit under that is a number of sub-strategies, and we've already started work on what a rail strategy would look like. So actually it's a priority for the combined authority, because combined authorities going forward will have a stronger strategic role in shaping rail services within their area. So we need to be prepared for that role going forward with the formation of Great British Railways, and have our strategy in place, or certainly have started that conversation as to what we prioritise as a combined authority, taking on board comments around historically priorities have been around access to London. Not saying that won't be a priority going forward, but obviously we need to determine what that looks like for the future. With regards references to Midlands Connect, I think as a combined authority, all combined authorities now have a much stronger strategic role when it comes to transport. So Midlands Connect, along with the other sub-regional transport bodies, performed that role previously. But now combined authorities have a much stronger voice, and there's an expectation that combined authorities will take that role moving forward. So I think we're in a transitional period where we are working with Midlands Connect at the moment, and we're kind of in a transition where their funding programme has been changed, and it's determining what that's going to look like in the future. But whilst they still exist as a body, we will continue to engage on a strategic transport perspective. In terms of bus services, I think absolutely that's what the local transport plan is for, is in terms of looking at our priorities, how are we going to deliver all transport services across Greater Lincolnshire. In terms of this report specifically, and looking at an engagement strategy, all I can kind of ask of members and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is that we get people to respond to this engagement process when it's live, because this is where we kind of capture all of that data. This is where we get all of that information, because it's quite hard as a combined authority, certainly when you're looking at funding and prioritising certain schemes, if you're just reliant on anecdotal kind of evidence. We need to capture it, we need to have it in writing, we need to be able to evidence it afterwards, because it gives us a stronger a stronger story and a stronger evidence base to be able to prioritise certain routes. So that's what I would say is that's the purpose of engaging with the public and with stakeholders, is to gather all this evidence.
I think you've got a degree of cultural inertia against that. We've had this bit about Berlin, Marsh, etc. There's been a number of transport policies and people have made comment, and then each time there's another one and they don't see any action. So I think you've got a little bit of a hill to climb to sort of re-engage with people. So good luck on that one. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of comments, really. I think any survey needs an open box where, you know, I've seen so many surveys with all closed, yes or no, but I think there needs to be an open box for comments so people can, if it's outside the questions, they can put their ideas down. I think that's essential, actually. And then also, I haven't seen it yet, but I believe the mayor has authority to actually create their own bus services.
I think she said she was going to buy a bus company.
Yeah. So I just think that that we need to explore that because then you're not relying on people that have subsidies and stuff like that. You can look where your priorities are and you can direct your own buses and such like to the priorities, whatever that comes out at when the research and when the surveys have done. So I think that needs to be looked into. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a request, really, that we make every effort to change the notion that we don't have transport on a Sunday. In this county, we just don't have transport on a Sunday. There are places that I know have no buses, no trains, no tractors, nothing. It would be really good if we could try and focus on that, I think, and try and improve connectivity across Lincolnshire on a Sunday specifically. That's all.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I won't read out my statement about the 56A again. But a couple of things. The trains, like Skegness, they get 2 carriages, and that is through the summer as well, which is an absolute nightmare. As you can imagine, it'd be absolutely busy. So if we can look at that sort of thing, that'd be fantastic. Regarding the engagement, would it be possible to have something on there asking residents if there's been a service cut during COVID that they'd want back or something like that? Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you very much. Recommendation from this is that we have reviewed the report and support the development of a Greater Lincolnshire local transport plan and the proposed engagement structure, but we request that officers take into consideration the feedback that we have presented from the floor. Are we in agreement with that? Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much. Unanimous. Item 9 now, which is the Greater Lincolnshire Enhanced Partnership and the Bus Service Improvement Plan. You're suffering. This report, which is on pages 71 to 80 of the agenda pack, invites the committee to consider a report of the Greater Lincolnshire Enhanced Partnership and the Bus Service Improvement Plan, which was presented to the GLCCA Transport Board on the 1st of April. The recommendations to the committee are to review and comment on the attached report and to support the development of the Greater Lincolnshire Enhanced Partnership and the Bus Service Improvement Plan. I'll pass you over to Lana again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe I need to be apologising for taking up the whole agenda.
No, you're well behind. Well, you're well behind the housing one, so you're fine.
Yeah. So, item 9, this report presents the implementation plan for transitioning from the 3 existing local enhanced partnerships for bus services to a single Greater Lincolnshire-wide model. It also sets out the process for developing a new unified bus service improvement plan, which will become the key strategic document alongside the local transport plan. The paper explains the statutory requirements, the proposed governance arrangements, including a new Greater Lincolnshire Enhanced Partnership Board, and the milestones taking us up to April 2027, when the new model will be fully in place. So, as the Chair says, the Transport Board were asked to comment on the proposals and approve the draft terms of reference and implementation plan, and agree and issue the required notices to begin the formal statutory process. So the Overview and Scrutiny Committee are invited to comment on that paper.
Any Councillor Bowles?
Sorry, again. It's just hopefully a simple one, really. We're moving from 3 to one single one covering the whole area. So how are we going to ensure that, you know, the local differences that we've spoken about today across the different areas are not diluted, and, you know, people's local issues really matter, you know, regarding, you know, mobility, as Councillor Cully has discussed in areas. Same in Gainsborough, we have really deprived areas. So how are we going to ensure that those local differences and needs are really met by one big body?
So if I come back on that one, so in terms of one Greater Lincolnshire Enhanced Partnership, for it to become one, from the Lincolnshire Enhanced Partnership, it's one additional bus provider, which would make it a Greater Lincolnshire, because some of the Lincolnshire providers also provide the services in North and North East Lincolnshire. So in that regard, it's an operating model that Lincolnshire are probably quite used to. In terms of those local differences, where we've got existing local forums that exist, there's absolutely no intention that those forums go, or that they are that this supersedes those forums. We absolutely still need those local forums, but what this is ensures that we have one strategic partnership going forward where it comes to bus service improvement. But hopefully local issues are still captured locally.
Answer the question. Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a quick one about the transitionary arrangements around BSIP funding. So any unspent BSIP funds that the current local authorities have come 2027, what will happen to that?
So in terms of transitionary arrangements, we've passported all funding for 26-27 to enable you to deliver those BSIP plans for this financial year. In terms of financing future financial years, that hasn't been determined yet, so that would have, as to whether the funding would be passported to the constituent authorities, and how that happens, that obviously that will need to go through the Combined Authorities Board in terms of budgetary arrangements. I think in terms of any underspend, as long we would obviously need to look at that outside of this meeting, but it would need to ensure that it's still continuing to deliver on the new BSIP plans in terms of once that's adopted in ready for April 27, so would need to ensure that any underspend is delivering on those new BSIP plans going forward.
So if there is an issue in terms of BSIP use of a capital project, and that capital project has not been delivered by 2027, there is some mechanism there for some flexibility.
Yeah, so as part of the local transport delivery plan, which is the return that the combined authority has to do to the DFT, which is in terms of the setting out of exactly what we're spending all of our transport funding on. So that sets out all of that plan. There is a degree of flexibility within that in terms of the funding which is going to be spent in year and the funding which is used for multi-year programmes. And the local transport delivery plan, again, the arrangements with DFT, they allow us to amend the plan in year, and we also provide a comprehensive plan ready for the start of each new financial year as well. So there is a degree of flexibility in terms of working between both the constituent authorities, us as the combined authority, and then reporting that to DFT.
Any other questions? One quick note. I lost a very good programmer to the Dutch authorities, looking at using artificial intelligence to smash together transport systems to get a harmonised system across the entire country. Yeah. So that's not me encouraging you to go to Holland for a weekend. So. Right. Recommendation to the committee that we've considered the report. We've raised a couple of opinions that should be incorporated where possible. Can I have a vote on it? Again, unanimous. Thank you very much for all three items, Lana. We now move on to item 10 on the agenda, which is the riveting topic, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee Work Planning for 26-27. The item is on pages 81 to 92 of the agenda pack and sets out the key principles and proposes an approach to consulting on the key issues for overview and scrutiny and the planning of the work committee for 26-27. We ask the committee that the approach to consulting, they recommend that the approach to consulting on the key issues of overview and scrutiny and the planning of the work committees for 26-27 be taken forward by myself, supported by the statutory scrutiny officer, including consultation with the chief officers, the executive, other stakeholders, including the mayor and the chairs of the GLCA, boards, advisory panels, and the chairman of the GLCCA audit committee. I'll now pass you over to Michael to present the report. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. So, Michael Carr, Interim Statutory Scrutiny Officer for your committee. And as the Chair has just pointed out, in brief, page 81 of the agenda sets out a proposed approach for consulting on the development of the Scrutiny Work Programme for a year in accordance with statutory scrutiny guidance and best practice. And given the time in the local government committee cycle, now is an apposite time to go out to consult key stakeholders, including chief officers of the authority on the key issues, and then obviously to bring that back to the committee to consider the items for the whole year ahead, what the purpose of those items are, what it wants to get out of it, and who the key witnesses might be. So it's really to consider and review the key issues, the timing of that, and the approach that you want to take to really make sure that the committee is being as effective as it can throughout the next year. So really, the report just outlines the proposed approach for the consent of the committee to take it forward by the chair, supported by myself, bring it back to the next meeting.
The report, if you look at the constitution, so far in the 4 scrutiny committees we've had, we've covered about 50% of the delegated topics. The corporate plan includes the full breadth of it. It details the paper, what we should look at, what we can look at, what we encourage you and your constituents to bring to the scrutiny committee. We've been somewhat tardy in getting to this stage because there's been a lot of interim posts. It's an embryonic system that we are working towards, etc. So I would ask you for any comments that help us, because the next item is that work plan, and some aspects of the work plan going forward, there are some meetings that are empty at this moment in time. So any questions from the floor be gratefully received. Councillor Wilson.
I'm not going to discuss what topics to do right at the moment, but you know, today's agenda is quite heavy.
Yeah, apologies.
And so going forward, once the topics start coming in, we need to look at the frequency of meetings because on average we've got 12 minutes to discuss each item, and the big items, and first one took 45 minutes, and then the rushing through the others, and I feel should I ask these questions, and I'm sure other members might do as well. So, you know, we need to think about the time to actually deep dive into the issues, you know, and so the frequency of the meetings might want to be considered. I don't know if that we need to amend the constitution.
It was set up at 4.
Yeah.
We've already suggested it should be 6. We're very conscious that there are some topics that are highly emotive. We can massage the agenda so we can say that rather than 12 minutes, it will be 45 minutes, and give people fair warning that it's going to be a long session, and bring in the officers as needed, so they don't have to listen, unless they really want to topics outside their specialty. You know, they have other jobs to do. Most of them are already doing 2 jobs because they're not only supporting the GLCCA but the constituent councillors as well, and they have to be applauded for that. So yes, we do hear what you say. I'm very conscious we're now at 2 hours and 5 minutes. It's a long time for a meeting.
Yeah. Could I also suggest that perhaps if there's a big topic, and your discretion would be needed, we have a meeting on that topic.
Yeah.
So we can deep dive. If you think it's important, you're the chair. If you think it's important, we have a deep dive into it. That, you know, we can arrange a meeting even if it's not a scheduled one.
Yeah, wholeheartedly support that, and that's why I drew attention to the plan and the items that are weeks, months that are, or meetings that are empty. But I would also turn it round and say, you know your constituents. Some people might not think housing is an emotive topic until it directly affects them. So if you see a topic and you think it's going to be one that is challenged, and I'll even bring into the topic, if you think they've got an officer or a constituent that wants to act, I'll refer to whistleblower protocols, and want to challenge it on that and bring that to it, then we can either have separate meetings or closed meetings, so we can properly scrutinise and hold the executive to account. Any other questions?
Just an observation, really. This is about Greater Lincolnshire and not about individual problems that we have in wards and areas.
It can be.
Because that just extends.
I know. I would not want to deprive the vehicle of escalation from a constituent going to the CDC. However, I'm conscious that we are limited in time, but if it is indicative of a broader problem, then we'll use that as a vehicle to bring it to scrutiny so that we can address the broader problem using that one as a vehicle, if you're comfortable with that. Any other questions? Right, the recommendation is that we accept the proposal, and that we have a draft letter that we will send out to the Chief Executive and the key holders, inviting comments, and I will extend that to the chair, to the floor. If there's any issues that you think out of the constitution that you want us to look at, tell us. Please tell us. Yeah. Can I have a vote on the paper? Oh. Unanimous. Which brings us to the final agenda item, which is the forward plan and work programme of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This item is on pages 93 to 112 of the agenda pack and sets out the committee's work plan programme for 26-27. Recommendations to the committee are to review and agree the committee's work programme as set out in the report, very conscious that we will amend it as we go through it, and it will be brought back to subsequent ones with those additions or omissions. Highlight any discussion, any additional scrutiny activities which could be considered for the inclusion in the work programme. The report is presented by Michael Carr, again the Interim Statutory Scrutiny Officer. Over to your good self, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. And as the Chair has pointed out, and as it says in the report, this is our current state of the work programme, notwithstanding the approach to consulting and then reviewing for the whole year ahead. We've identified some key items already, including the performance framework, which is alluded to earlier, which will be an important and instructive document for the authority, and key finance treasury items, which should be on the plan, but we'll build on that in review of the consultation on the key issues and bring it back to the committee with a full table of items for approval.
I think from Michael's comment there, we've already had a rough stab at what you might find emotive or important. We're looking at the transport plan on a regular iteration. I'm fairly certain that the housing one will come back quite regularly. We've mentioned the corporate plan and we've mentioned the performance framework. If you think of anything else that eats into the heart of your soul, please bring it to the committee. I would propose that we approve the work plan for 26-27, subject to consideration of any other items highlighted in today's discussions and discussions going forward.
Just before you do that, Chair, we've looked at quite a lot of high-level strategy plans this year, and underneath them, I assume there'll be action plans.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether some of those action plans, I'll leave it to people's discretion, some of those action plans should actually come back for discussion, as well as keeping an eye on the strategy, but actually look at the action plans and where the progression of how the strategy is going.
We're about 3 hours ahead of you. Michael and I were discussing at our own sub-meeting beforehand as to how to itemise the recommendations that we've come to, how they may sort of populate a action plan, because certainly the one on the housing plan is going to exercise Tracy's reading of her own shorthand, because there were a long list of recommendations to include in the minutes, and how we would then bring those back to the committee for validation, verification that they're actually being met in a timely manner. Any other questions? Could we have a show of hands? Unanimous again. They're just desperate to get out the door. Yeah. One final question.
It's a comment, actually. Thank you for your reports, and we do appreciate that as councillors, all of us here, and we know a lot of work goes into these reports, so we are grateful for them. Thank you.
I totally and utterly endorse that, and the Secretariat that support. I thank the councillors for sitting and contributing. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Meeting adjourned at 16:11, 16:12. Thank you very much for your time.